Good morning, everybody. Thanks very much for being here on what is a sad day for the state of Wisconsin and really for the city of Madison. Many of us watched last night, late in the evening, when a crowd of protesters, after an incident occurred that right here across the Capitol, began to protest in front of the jail. We know that in the United States and Wisconsin and every community around our state, peaceful protest is one of the ways that change occurs. But violent protest, where a mob forms and government refuses to act, is the exact opposite of how change will occur. For those people who decided that the way to express themselves was through criminal acts and things that the entire state of Wisconsin now looks at our capital city in shock and awe, that is something that should never be tolerated. It should have never gotten to this point. When we look at the city of Madison, where just a week ago the mayor had to apologize for making a video praising the police and the hard job that they do, we see that Governor Evers has basically stood silent until today when he did his walk around to be able to see what was going on in downtown Madison. State Street occurred weeks ago and very little happened afterward. People have not been prosecuted, people have not been held accountable, and that has to change. So we are here to stand with the citizens all across the state who are sick and tired of watching things happen around the state where protesters are not held accountable. I just got off a telephone call where we had a good conversation with black pastors from throughout the state. And one of the things that we talked about was, how do we make the positive change that they want? One of the pastors actually had a great quote, and he said, every single person needs to be held accountable, no matter what their skin color or no matter what their job title. That means if a police officer commits an injustice, they need to be held accountable and put in jail for the crime that they committed. It also means that if a protester tears down the statue or attacks a state senator or goes and blocks traffic and attacks people in their vehicles, they will be held accountable too. But we have not seen that happen in the city of Madison. That is why we are here today saying that I do not feel confident with the employees who are working inside the Capitol to know that they are going to be safe. I don't feel confident that the people who come to visit Madison are going to be safe. And that needs to be different. It needs to be held to a different standard, and this mayor has to step up and do her job. We are sick and tired of watching the chaos that is occurring from outside the Capitol boundaries. It also means that one of her allies, Governor Evers, needs to use his ability to bring in the state patrol, the Capitol Police, to make sure that at least the people who work around the Capitol are going to be safe. They're not going to be dragged from their car. They're not going to be a victim of crime. So we are here to hope that that will happen. It should not be partisan. This should be something that we can hopefully get bipartisan consensus on, that crime is wrong and that people who commit it should be prosecuted. So with that, I'll turn it over to Assembly Majority Leader Jim Steineke.
Yeah, I can't add a whole lot to what the speaker said. I can't even begin to tell everybody how upset I think people across the state are currently about what's going on in the city of Madison. We all watched our Twitter feed last night as acts of violence were occurring on a regular basis, and there was repeatedly reported no police presence. No police presence when the Capitol was being vandalized, no police presence when statues were being taken down, no police presence when a sitting Democratic state senator was being assaulted. This is a failure of leadership at all levels in the city of Madison, and it has to end. It can't. Press releases aren't going to do it. You know, the governor came out this morning. I'm appreciative of the fact that he sent out a statement 10 or 11 hours later after the fact. But just saying that he's not going to tolerate this anymore, it's just words. The protesters learned from weeks ago that there are no consequences to their actions. The empty words coming from the governor's office and the mayor's office are just that. They're empty threats at this point because there has been no action. The governor's statement today takes no action. There is no direction. He comes out and says that these actions are not to be tolerated and that he may reserve the right to call up the National Guard, but no action is being taken. The protesters and the people rioting and causing this violence last night, They're promising to come back day after day after day, and Governor Evers has not articulated a plan on how he's going to stop them. The mayor has not articulated a plan on how she's going to stop them. The city of Madison is in dire crisis right now, and there is a lack of leadership at the top, and action needs to be taken. Words are words, but action means more than words. The governor has to articulate what he is going to do to ensure the safety of state property, the safety of the citizens, the safety of the people that work here, and more importantly, the safety of the citizens that travel around the state to come down here and have their voices heard in a peaceful way. He's failing us on all levels right now, and that has to end. With that, I'll turn it over to Representative August.
Thanks, Jim. The Speaker and the Majority Leader have really said it all. I've been doing this job and working in this building for almost 15 years, 16 years, and I just can't believe that this is where we are today. That we have a situation last night where one of our colleagues, who is one of the most progressive and liberal members of the Wisconsin legislature, is attacked for taking a photo of what's going on. I mean, that is where we are at in this state. And that is something that should concern every citizen of this state, and it darn sure should concern the governor of the state. He has the authority to use the Capitol Police, to use the State Patrol, to request mutual aid from other departments to put a stop to what's been going on around this Capitol Square. Not only does he have the authority to do it, he has the moral obligation to do it. So it's easy to put out a few tweets about how concerned you are, but we're asking the governor to take some real action to prevent this from happening again and ensuring the safety of, as the Speaker said, not only the citizens of the state, but everybody who likes to come and visit this Capitol and everyone who works in it.
I have to answer any questions.
Are you going to call an extraordinary session to take up any of those bills that Evers and Assembly Democrats want?
So we actually have had good conversations. I had a conversation with the chair of the Black Caucus. I also have been working with members to see where consensus can be gathered. Unfortunately, like far too many things that Governor Evers does, he never consulted the legislature. It wasn't a time for partisan politics. It's a time for people of goodwill to sit down and say, where can we find that common ground? I do believe that we will be able to find it. I also know that we are not going to rush into an answer without having the proper opportunity for us to look at what the real solutions are. But I think the first solution starts with saying that you can't commit crimes, you cannot commit battery, you do not have the opportunity to destroy the Capitol. That is why we are here today. So I do, unlike Governor Evers, allow people to ask more than one question. But at the same time, I certainly think we are here today to talk about how do we stop looting and vandalism in the Capitol so that we can have that honest dialogue to say what are the long-term reforms that many of those who are here peacefully would like us to take a look at.
What kind of timeline do protesters expect?
Well, I don't care about the protesters, right? I mean, it's about the entire citizens of the state. So the entire citizens of the state have a right to, number one, give us their input. That's what we are in the process of doing right now. As I go around the state, there is widespread support for the opportunity for us to say everybody should be held accountable no matter what the color of your skin is and no matter what the job description that you have. We know that by and large, I think the vast majority of people in the state know the police have a really difficult job and that they should be held to a higher standard, but that they also are human beings and make mistakes. So we want to find a way to appropriately balance that when someone commits a crime, they go to prison for a long time, but that we also know, like every single job that any of us have, mistakes can be made and we have to find that appropriate balance.
And let me just be clear. We're not saying that we don't care about the peaceful protesters that are coming out in here and having their voices heard. We care about what they're saying, and we believe that it's important and there's a valid cause behind it. What the Speaker is referring to are the rioters and the looters and the people that were perpetrating violence last night. We don't care what they have to say. We're not going to negotiate with terrorists. We're not negotiating with the people that did the damage to the Capitol, to the statues, to Senator Carpenter. Those people are people we're not going to negotiate with.
So, number one, the Assembly has over 100 bills that are in the state Senate. We are looking at what's going to happen with those. I think it's more realistic for us to take the time to work to see what the answers are and to come back right away in either a special session after the election or the potential to come back in January or February. But I do not want this to be something where we try to rush to pass one bill to be able to pose for pictures and not have the systemic reform that needs to happen. I think there are a lot of issues that people are bringing forward. Some deal with poverty. Some deal with the fact that we have a school system that seems to be in crisis in areas that have intense poverty and don't provide the opportunities that a lot of people need. They also are issues with the way that we could do training. I support increasing training to make sure that we have more tools at the hands of police to guarantee that they are going to do a better job that they do right now. Again, 99+% of the police officers, I just did a ride along this week with a police deputy and watched how incredibly challenging it is for them to do their job with all of the things that have to go into it. When you pull over a car, you have no idea what the person inside that car has. You have no idea what their mental state is. You have no idea what you are walking up to, much less having the opportunity to go into a very dangerous scene where you're called for domestic violence, you're called for an incident that you have no idea what's happening. So they have to be well trained. But again, I want to be very supportive of the idea that reforms need to happen, but the vast majority of the police do a good job, and I don't want to let that get left behind.
Capitol Police had any responsibility for policing Capitol grounds last night? What happened?
So even though we get to work inside this beautiful building, the Capitol, it is entirely under the control of the governor and DOA. So they have the control of the building access, they have control of the Capitol Police, they have the control of DCI and the State Patrol. So all we have the ability to do is to publicly urge them to do a better job to guarantee that the Capitol employees are safe, that the building is safe 24 hours a day, not just during work hours, because there are still a lot of people who walk around this area and they should feel safe being able to go to their car if they're working late at night, or a state employee in any office building as they begin to return to work shouldn't worry about their public safety.
That would actually be a great question for Governor Evers, because as the speaker said, he's in control of the Capitol and the Capitol Police. But I'm curious as well. Why did it take so long for law enforcement to respond? Where was the Capitol Police? Where were the Madison police officers? Why was it the UW Police Department that responded and not those other entities? We need those answers, because as attacks are happening on the grounds of the Capitol and there is no police presence, I think we should all be curious as to whether there were orders to stand down, whether there were orders not to intervene in these protests. That's something I think we should all question.
You guys are saying that actions speak much louder than words. What's the Assembly or even the GOP majority doing to address concerns of the peaceful protesters? Yeah, and that's the thing that we've been working on. So our members have been meeting in their districts with the folks who have concerns. You've seen some of our members even attend protests because they want to show support for the peaceful protesters who are doing the right thing. I think that we look around the country, and I have seen Iowa as an example, on a bipartisan basis, passed a bill at one of the last days of their legislative session. They were already in session, that put in some of the reforms that people worry about. I think that we already know in Wisconsin that chokeholds have not been taught at the academy in a long time. The vast majority of police officers that I have spoken to say that that is something that we'd easily make sure that no one utilizes in a way that would be problematic going forward. As I mentioned, I think we have pretty good support for increasing the training requirements. Wisconsin already has some of the most assertive training requirements for our law enforcement officers in the country, but we can always do better. And I think that's an area that we're looking at. So our goal, again, is not to rush in and try to have a one-size-fits-all answer. We would rather do it in coordination with the faith community. We would rather do it in coordination with minority communities to actually have their voices heard and have a bill that can be brought forward that can actually become law through that collaborative process and not just try to jam something through because of the politics of the situation.
We want to see the Wisconsin National Guard activated through night as a protection of parents and also protesters, and sometimes that makes them
There has to be an action plan, whether it's utilizing the Capitol Police, the state police, the police in the city of Madison, whatever it is, there has to be a clear indication from this administration in the Capitol here in the East Wing and from the mayor of the city of Madison that that kind of behavior won't be tolerated. Personally, I believe that a large police presence is going to be necessary. We've seen what appeasement does. We've seen what a lack of law enforcement presence does. It allows the rioters, the looters, and the people perpetrating this violence to be emboldened. Lack of police presence has not worked. There has to be some kind of a plan, and we're looking towards the governor and we're looking towards the mayor to enact that plan, because unfortunately we have no capability to direct those resources.
Well, and we see even this morning, as we walked around the Capitol and kind of surveyed the damage, they had already brought in private contractors. ServPro is here to wipe off all the paint and the graffiti. They had already gotten people to clean up the glass. So within a matter of hours, they were able to clean the entire area up. How about if within a matter of hours we're able to deploy the police so it never happens in the first place? That's really where it seems like that the priorities are upside down. We don't want to spend the taxpayers' money just cleaning up the violence. We want to spend the taxpayers' money protecting the public and ensuring that it never occurs in the first place. So that's what we hope occurs tonight. If it's Governor Evers working with the mayor to get the police in a more assertive way, responding quicker, if it's ultimately calling out the National Guard, which I would only do as a last resort, certainly we have to trust Governor Evers that he's going to actually make a decision. Part of the challenge that we have is it seems like decisions are always made by the results of the day as opposed to the proactive nature to say, what can we do to ensure that this never occurs in the first place? So let's hope that starts with the change today, so that tonight we can have the beginning of peaceful protests if they're so organized, and violent protests are quickly put down and the people are arrested. Sure. Let's just go back and look at how the most positive changes have occurred, the civil rights movement. That was done through non-violent protests, because people began to look for folks of faith. It started with people like, obviously, the faith community, even in the 1960s, to say, we are better than this. We can do better as a society. It never really turned violent unless it was, frankly, done by the police and some of the trying to put down the protesters of the civil rights movement. And I think that's what we need to use as a model. It is not throwing Molotov cocktails at the police department. It is not trying to get people in their cars, literally just driving home from work and dragging them into the street to try to make some kind of a point. It's not walking into a Madison restaurant across the street with a bullhorn shouting into every person who are just having dinner to somehow say you're going to make a point. It is about finding areas of common ground and doing it through peaceful protest. So I have been supportive of the idea that if people want to peacefully protest, that is their right as an American, and that is how change happens. But as we have now watched this movement spiral from peaceful protests into doing things which are violent, that is going to turn people in the opposite direction and hurt the very reforms that people want to have happen. And I also think that we need to have real actions, right? It's not just about changing the names of Eskimo pies and all these things that seem like they're just virtue signaling. I would like to have those honest conversations. And as I mentioned before, I promised Representative Myers, the chair of the Assembly Black Caucus, that we would have those discussions and come up with a meaningful package to make things happen. Now, sometimes politics is slow, but it also is deliberate, and that's how we get things right.
Speaker Vos, you said that violence isn't the way to make any sort of change, but for decades, Black Wisconsinites are at the bottom in numerous categories: education, income, incarceration. So clearly, for decades, the legislature hasn't done much to address those disparities. How do you guys start to get at that?
Well, we actually have been doing things, and unfortunately the status quo is very difficult. The school choice movement was started entirely as a way because we saw, especially in MPS, people of color and their children are not getting the education that they deserve. That's why we have intense poverty. We see that we don't have the job skills that are necessary. We see that far too many people rely on public assistance to be able to afford their lives. We need to create economic opportunity. One of the best ways to do that is to have a great school system, and that's why we so strongly support school choice, even though unfortunately now Democrats, as a matter of routine, oppose the very idea of trying to make reforms in the education system. We want to make sure that we have job training. That's why under Governor Walker we dramatically increased funding for job training and wanted to make sure people had a chance to not stay on welfare forever, but an opportunity to get into the private sector workforce. I think those are the things that we need to do with economic opportunity, and not just more finger pointing to say, geez, somebody didn't do something then or somebody doing something now. I'm willing to be a partner for anybody who wants to focus on growing the pie and doing it in a way that creates more economic opportunities and not just more government.
One more. Hey, so you talked about the bullhorn incident yesterday. Have you seen that video? Do you have a response to the police force? Do you feel like that was an appropriate use of force in that instance to arrest Devontae Johnson?
Yeah, I just watched the video, so I was not obviously there. I've only seen what the media reported. But when you have somebody go inside a restaurant, private property, that is no different than walking inside your home or your office with a bullhorn, screaming at people, using foul language. The appropriate thing to do is to not take the law into your own hands. It's to call the police, which is exactly what they did. The police responded. I think that they tried to de-escalate as much as they could. He was combative. Don't forget, he had a baseball bat and a bullhorn threatening people inside a private establishment. That should never be tolerated. So I think the police acted appropriately. I think that at the end of the day, the answer should be that's the kind of person who perhaps had mental health issues and certainly should have any kind of treatment that's necessary. But the first thing that starts with it is arresting somebody who breaks the law. And that's what we have to show more examples of, that if people choose to go outside the norms of peaceful protest, they need to be arrested and prosecuted so that those who want to be there peacefully protesting are not put in the same category with those who are breaking the law. Okay, thank you very much for being here.
This program is a production of WisconsinEye, an independent, nonpartisan, nonprofit media network with a mission to inform, educate, and engage the citizens of Wisconsin. WisconsinEye is the nation's first and only independently funded state civics broadcast network, providing gavel-to-gavel access to government proceedings and events at the state capitol.